Okay, everybody, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to pre-listing home inspection, the hidden advantages and the unexpected risks that we take when we do this. This is a brand new class. We haven't had it before. Pre-listing home inspections are something that we don't often talk about just because it's an added expense for our seller. But we have started to see so many issues with inspection contingencies and other things that I think it's something that we all need to consider for certain homes. So today we're going to talk about explain what a pre-listing home inspection is and how it differs from a buyer's inspection, evaluate when recommending one benefits the seller, anticipate the challenges and potential legal negotiation pitfalls, and use the inspection report to strengthen marketing and pricing strategies. So what is a pre-listing home inspection? Any inspections that you do before you list the home. They can be as broad or as narrow as the client and you feel are necessary. I've listed some of them out here. HVAC, roof, electrical, plumbing, a general home inspection, or foundation, but only as warranted for that foundation. I would say the foundation is if there has been previous problems with the foundation, or if you had a general home pre-inspection done and they called out something. I would say that some of these other inspections might be wise, like an HVAC inspection or a roof inspection to get done if there's questions on maybe the house, how there might be something wrong with those things or suspect there's something wrong with those things. I will say that HVAC and roof are two of the things that we are seeing repeatedly reasons for homes falling out of contract because the buyer gets scared off, their inspector calls something out, maybe there was an unknown something going on. Those are two that I would really recommend so we can supply that to our potential buyers, and I'll explain how we do that later. A roof inspection, I would only be doing that on a roof that's maybe over 10 years old or that has some visually might be ugly or something going on. And the same with electrical or plumbing, only if something happened in the home that was warranted to have those additional. Maybe they did some work themselves, or maybe when they bought the home, there was some questions that they just didn't address. And the general home inspection is what we see happening more and more often with homes that we're listing, or people that are, people are listing homes and they say, hey, pre-inspected, ready to go for your buyer. So what is a pre-inspection in today's market, or why we do one in today's market? So a pre-inspection does help increase transparency and trust between the buyers and the sellers because it's saying, hey, here's our home, we had this done, we're going to tell you what it said. And it can help reduce some of the surprises and the derailment of the deals that we're seeing. I keep repeating this, but I will say, y'all, the number of homes that are falling out of contract due to inspections is just, we saw a little bit of it before COVID. We saw this happen and we're seeing it happen again. Buyers are paying a premium price for these homes, and any little thing that happens, man, they are out the door. And our sellers, because they are hearing that homes are still selling for a premium, are a little delusional on what they actually need to have a home ready to go. Another reason we might want to have one is it helps us to price the home accurately. Now, allows for more realistic pricing based on property condition. You might have a seller that is thinking that their home is in really great condition, and you have a general home inspection done and their inspector calls out that HVAC system is, I don't want to say end of life, but that's some of the terminology that some of the end of use, that's some of the wording that some of our inspectors use, that they want to, it's almost at the end of the span. Now, I was just looking at my own home the other day and thinking about some of my systems. Knock on wood, I have two HVAC systems that are almost 20 years old. They're 18 years old. They'll be 19 years old next year. The same with my water heaters, 2 water heaters. Part of that, I think the longevity of it is there's only the two of us in the house. It's not a whole lot of use on some of these systems that you might think there is. And they were built at a time where the systems were still the mid-2000s. We still had some really good systems going. There are some, I saw an HVAC system the other day at a house I was showing that was 37 years old and it was still working. I walked outside and I was looking at it and I'm thinking, I can't believe it's that old. But they just made things better back then. But having your inspector look at it or having an HVAC specialist look at that and giving it a good bill of health will help with your negotiations down the line. So, and your pricing. The one thing, I'm going to step back to the pricing section right there. Say you are getting ready to list it and your general home inspection or these inspections show that these items might need some work. You can more accurately price what that home looks like, knowing that those systems are either good or that it's probably going to be asked for a new one when you go to sell it. So it does give the seller some control in the repair issues. One of the reasons I really love a home pre-inspection is we find that there's something wrong, and it could be something very minor. Maybe the HVAC needs a new condenser coil. Your buyer, if you go under contract and the buyer finds that, it could queer the deal. They could walk away because of that. But if the seller does it before they actually list it, you can list that as one of the upgrades, one of the updates. Some of the other things a pre-inspection does for the seller is those little minor issues that add up to bigger red flags for a buyer. When you go and your buyer's doing an inspection and they call out all the air filters, like how in the world did they not replace those? Y'all need to be, with your listings, telling your people to replace those air filters right away. One thing we see in negotiations a lot of times is the buyer wants all the air vents cleaned. Sometimes they'll come in and clean all the vents in the house and they spend, cost a couple $1,000s, where most of the time a seller cleaning those vents with a long vacuum cleaner hose, a brush getting in there, could maybe not have that be requested because those immediate openings are clean. I have a real attitude about it. Unless there was animals in that house or a smoker, the normal dirt and dust that build up in those vents, unless it's very old and a very dirty house, it's not going to be noticeably different if those are cleaned, especially if you're cleaning where the air filter is the intake and then the outtake vents. Repairing things on the seller's schedule, not being under the pressure of a buyer having to repair the things. I like pre-inspections for all these reasons. Sometimes there's some issues that an inspector will call out that because it's just a home inspector, it's not as bad as what they're making it out to be, and they'll call it out, and you can have the expert in the field come in and tell you what's going on and correct that at very minimal cost, because if a buyer's inspector does it, the buyer's going to be demanding big dollars back for something that isn't really an issue. We had a listing this summer that the seller had inadvertently, because they never used their fireplace, they had put a cookie sheet up where the flue is, because the lady that lived there, she put a decorative glass candle holders in her fireplace. She didn't use it. It was a real wood-burning fireplace, even with the flue closed, because those fireplaces, they're open to the sky. If you can actually look up in them. So she closed that flue, and then she closed it off with this cookie sheet that she managed to kind of shove up in there. Well, the home inspector wasn't about to touch the cookie sheet. The home inspector called it out as a defective fireplace chimney and that it was blocked and unusable. Several $100s later, and a bunch of negotiating back and forth, and us having to bring in a fireplace inspector, we got that remedied, where if we had it pre-inspected, they would have known that fireplace was blocked. Giving the seller that control is another good reason to have that pre-inspection done. Shortens the negotiation time. There's fewer surprises during the inspection period, so you'll have a smoother closing. A lot of times, you all know it, your resolution time period is 3 to 5 days usually, depending on what the contract said. looking at their calendars and they're all waking up in the middle of the night counting their days, making sure they're not missing their resolution timeline, inspection timelines. To have this pre-inspection done, knowing what's going to be found most likely, is really going to help in your negotiation time, because the buyer's going in it already knowing about it. But if you do this pre-inspection and disclose this, way less for that buyer's inspector to find. So in the marketing edge, marketing a pre-inspected home status builds buyer confidence and generates stronger offers. Now, when I see a pre-inspection on a home my client is looking at, I of course am telling them, yes, let's review their pre-inspection, but you're still going to have your own inspection. And I highly recommend that. Never, if you're the listing agent, your pre-inspection is no guarantee to that buyer that they shouldn't have an inspection. In fact, they can't even use that as like suing you later down the line if something wasn't discovered by that, because you are going to have a clause that you're going to add to it, and I'll show you that later, that protects you from that. So the risk reduces the risk of a renegotiation and cancellation. Buyers are less likely to buy out. This is the biggest reason that I'm going to say, between getting the repairs done early on some of these homes that we're going to be doing it on, that we'll talk about in just a minute, and the buyers being less likely to buy out because you already told them about an issue. Those are my number 2 reasons that I would have a pre-inspection done. And I have some reasons why I wouldn't do a pre-inspection as well. So why pre-inspect in today's market? Some sellers' natural inclination is to shoot themselves in the foot at every turn. A pre-inspection can help set the stage for what to expect when the home goes under contract, and give the seller a list of items that must be disclosed or repaired. So I added this, and that's a little guy sticking a knife in a light switch. We have sellers often that are difficult at best. They think their home's perfect, nothing's wrong with it, they're not going to fix a certain thing, they're selling it as is. The other seller is the seller that doesn't fix things correctly, and you can see it in their home when you're walking through the home, maybe doing your listing appointment, halfway done repairs, not well done repairs, things like that. And it's because they're cheap. They're jumping over dollars to save pennies, or they just don't have the common sense on how to repair things. A pre-inspection can make things more real for them on what's actually going to be asked for, because you get that pre-inspection and you can help them fix those things or address those things or disclose those things before you're even in negotiation with the buyer. I have several clients in the past that kind of come to mind. It is like you are dragging them to the finish line of getting something sold because they are so mule-headed. They're either mule-headed or just not bright enough to understand how the world works. So a pre-inspection can really help sellers like that, and that's my favorite time to do a pre-inspection, is when I know I have a house that is going to have some issues and it's going to be really hard to get through the inspection and negotiation when we do finally go under contract. So why you may not want to have a pre-inspection. So here's the cons of not having a pre-inspection, and then I'm going to take a break and talk about all these things we went through. The cost to the seller, $350 at the very, very lowest end for some basic inspections. I put $700, and it could be even more. Disclosure obligations. So once you have a pre-inspection, there is no closing Pandora's box. Once you know, you must disclose. So once the items in that inspection are discovered, that either has to be repaired or disclosed. So be really wise when you're looking at these homes, and be just talking to your seller about things that could be discovered, like an HVAC system that is really truly on its very last legs. Do you want to know that? And if you do, be prepared to, what is that, $20,000, $20,000 to have those things replaced. But that's the biggest obstacle, I think, of getting a pre-inspection, is that disclosure obligation, that the seller has to understand that they are going to have to either fix or disclose. Also, explaining to the seller that the buyers are still going to get their own inspection. So you have to have a seller that's wise enough to understand how that works. Mr. Seller, we're having our pre-inspection so we know what's wrong with the home, so we can save money and time in the long run and actually get a higher price for the home by fixing these items first and addressing them or disclosing them so the buyer knows what they're looking at. The buyer may still request repairs. If you disclose something in the property condition disclosure or you give the buyer this inspection report, it is considered disclosed and not negotiable anymore. It can only be negotiated in the purchase and sale agreement. So if you disclose HVAC doesn't work, needs to be replaced, something like that, and then the buyer goes and has their inspection done and they request the HVAC to be replaced, you're at kind of an impasse because, no, Miss Buyer, we disclosed this. You can't request that. Now, of course, they might find another thing to back out of the deal when you do disclose additional items, so the buyers are well aware that these are items that you better address this in your purchase and sale agreement. A limited shelf life. The reports are only going to be good for, I'm going to say, maybe 3 months at most if you have something done, because things break. Okay, and so you better make sure you're pricing this thing to sell right away. Perceived bias. Buyers are going to question the neutrality of a seller-hired inspector. And that's why you're going to make sure you're going to hire an inspector that is legitimate. It's somebody that it's a known name. The same with your plumber, a licensed plumber, licensed. Maybe you have your HVAC person or your electrical person. So there's no accusation of maybe that, man, I wouldn't be using any family members to be doing the pre-inspection that you're going to disclose something on. If the seller has a home inspector as a family relative, man, come over and do it, and I would be disclosing everything that was found or fixing, but I would not be supplying that home inspection and maybe saying this is a brother-in-law. That's kind of something that's going to only happen once in a blue moon, so don't worry about that. You can always call me if you have a question about that. But perceived bias, it's just like the appraisers when we have something appraised. Well, that was your appraiser. They favored you. I'm like, anybody that's licensed, are they going to risk their license online or not noticing something that's actually wrong with the house? Repair fatigue and anger on the seller's part. Sellers might overcorrect or feel overwhelmed by identified issues. We always have those sellers that are going to overcorrect things that really don't need to be corrected. They go out and they buy a brand new HVAC system, spend $20,000 when maybe just that replacement of a part of something or some new refrigerant or something, that $20,000 would have gone farther towards maybe a price reduction, not listing it as high and marketing it a different way. You have to be very wise. This is a class and a situation where this is a thinking man's game was never more true. When you are suggesting that your seller get a home inspection, you have to be able to talk to them about all the pros and all the cons. And I have a list here of best practice and agent guidance. You may want to suggest pre-inspections for older homes, estate sales, absentee owners, or unique properties. And by unique properties, I mean maybe like log cabins, or sometimes we'll have a house that has addition upon addition. We really need to have somebody come in and look at how that was done before we actually go to market and run into all kinds of problems. Here again, your wisdom has to come into play. One of the times I would suggest it is when the seller is demanding that a property be sold as is. Because people don't understand as is, especially our sellers. Even some agents don't understand what as is means. When a home is listed as is, it's the seller telling the buyer, I am not going to do any repairs. It doesn't mean you have to buy it as it stands for the price that you are asking for, unless, of course, inspections are refused. And then I'm going to say, man, walk away from that one, unless you have a contractor that's buying it and actually looked at it. But as is means that seller is not going to be doing any repairs. It doesn't mean that they're not going to reduce the price when you find something wrong as a buyer. Well, to help negate that happening, if you have a seller that says, I'm selling it as is, maybe they don't have the money, they don't want to do anything, they've lived in it, it's a great house, they're just stubborn, whatever it is, if you get a pre-inspection and you know what's wrong with it, you can price the home accordingly and have less likelihood of it getting a big reduction when the buyer goes to do their inspection, because they were already aware of everything when they came in and made that offer. Properties that have significant deferred maintenance. Now, can of worms here, y'all. You have to hear again with your client, and you sit down and discuss the pros and cons of this. If they have the ability to fix some of the things that were deferred, it would be a very wise idea maybe to get a pre-inspection, because then they can address items that become huge red flags for a buyer, which actually with a little bit of elbow grease and some pros coming in and taking care of things can really significantly increase the value of that home without a lot of money having to go into it. Just some work and some planning. So properties with significant deferred maintenance where the seller is either willing to get that price adjusted or do some of that work. Homes that are in excellent condition. That home was in excellent condition, and in fact it was such excellent condition that the seller and I saw no need for a pre-inspection. Nobody knew there was a cookie sheet shoved up in the fireplace. For a $500 home inspection would have solved that. It only cost us $200 to get the chimney inspected, so it wasn't that big a deal. But homes that are in excellent condition, you might want to get one of your toughest inspectors that you have to give a report so you can actually show buyers. I've had homes that we've had inspection reports on and supplied them to the buyers, and the buyers have waived inspections. It can help with homes that are really in excellent condition, where you might have 2 or 3 people looking to buy it, and that person that's not afraid to buy a home might make a really great offer because they saw that and trusted. They might still get their own inspection, but it just helps with getting that higher price and a quicker price. Homes where the seller wants a premium price. That's another time you might want to get a home inspection, because the home inspection could make the seller aware of things that they would help adjust that price in more the realm of what you feel is a realistic price. They can't justify that premium price if the home isn't in stellar condition. So once again, it could be help with your pricing negotiations with the seller if you recommend they do this. A sample script for your seller. Mr. Seller, a pre-inspection is like getting your car detailed before selling it, and let the buyer see the value right away. Now, a pre-inspection only works if the seller is willing to fix the things that were found wrong during that inspection. So here again, your wisdom on knowing what your seller might be likely to do comes into play. You also, when you're doing this, you have to handle disclosures properly according to Tennessee rules, and you're going to be sharing all the reports, and that's for your safety. Let's talk about disclosures. Property condition disclosure, still filled out by your seller, not by you. You don't touch it. And what we would recommend doing is they would fill out that report, and on the line where it says, are the things in working condition, and maybe there's a no, they have to mark that no, and then there's this little tiny line that says, if any of these were no, describe here. Your seller would just be saying, see attached inspection report. Now, your seller can also say on that line, if nothing's wrong, see attached inspection report, and make a list of things that were fixed and then give the inspection report. I will say, if your seller has any inspections done before they list, you are going to be obligated to share those reports, and what I recommend to protect you is you share the entire report, because if you got sued, forbid that from happening, but say that somebody sued somebody after they closed and you didn't supply that complete report, you would definitely probably lose your license, or at least you lose it for a couple months. Who knows what would happen, with mine too. So because I have to go with you on all of this. Any reports for pre-inspection that are done, strongly, you're going to be sharing the whole report, the whole inspection report. Now, if you have the HVAC inspected and the guy comes back and says you need to have it cleaned and you need to have like 1, 2, and 3 done, and the seller does 1, 2, and 3, there's no need to disclose that because the seller fixed it. It's been repaired. Get the receipts for it so you have it, because if there's ever a problem, you're going to have all that. If there was, say you get a home inspection and the seller fixes a bunch of the stuff, the seller's going to make a list of all the things that have been completed and with the receipts, and you are going to be supplying that. Now, where do you do this? I'm not going to be doing this in the RealTracs. What I would have in RealTracs is my seller's property condition disclosure, and then attached to that I would say, if you wish to make an offer, please request, and make sure that you have that available. You might have to send it to each person that's looking at the house. The reason I'm going to be very cautionary on you attaching it to the MLS is just because the amount of information that's going to be out there for people to look at isn't always the best idea. So here again, if you do this, we have to be very wise on how we. So come to me if you decide to do it, and I'll help walk you through that. And when I say share all reports, it wouldn't be a bad idea that anybody that's looking at the house, you have that ready to go. You could also leave it on the counter, like copies of it. That's a great idea, so they have that. What you do have to make sure happens is, before an offer comes in, make sure they have it, because it has to be signed off by the buyer that they saw it. And I would be asking that you ask for a returned copy that the buyer has initialed, because that comes into play with negotiation. So this is getting a little confusing, but it's okay. You'll be able to do it if you have this done. Hopefully the pre-inspection report, I would say in the private remarks, say pre-inspection report available, please request. I'll send it to you. Whatever, you're going to do that in the private comments. Now you can also put it in the public remarks, just say pre-inspection report available for interested parties. So I would also say that if you get an offer in and they didn't get those pre-inspection reports that you did, you're going to send it back with your pre-inspection report and say, please review these before making your offer. Why? We're going to go over that in a minute. This is why. Buyer and buyer agents do not always understand the importance of reviewing disclosed items, and that repair replacement on disclosed items may only be addressed in the purchase and sale agreement. When disclosing sharing pre-inspection report, add the following verbiage found in your office clauses. This is going to be a long paragraph, so give me a minute. Okay, this is actually found in office clauses, and you're going to be putting this on the front page of this inspection report that you are sending over. The seller has obtained, and I'm going to read this, sorry y'all. The seller has obtained and is providing a copy of a pre-listing home inspection report for buyer review. This report is supplied for disclosure purposes only, to provide information about the condition of the property as observed on the date of the inspection. The seller makes no representation or warranty, express or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of the report. The report should not be relied upon as a substitute for the buyer's own independent inspection and evaluation on the property. Buyers are strongly encouraged to obtain their own professional inspections. Here's the important paragraph, y'all. Any items disclosed or identified as needing repair, replacement, or further evaluation in the inspection report or through this disclosure must be specifically addressed in the purchase and sale agreement to be considered part of the negotiated terms between the buyer and seller. These items cannot be addressed during the negotiation period, as stated in the property condition disclosure and property condition exemption. There we go. So in our property condition disclosure and in our property condition exemption form, it states very clearly that disclosed items may not be negotiated on during the resolution period because they were disclosed. It is the purpose of the property condition disclosure. Everybody thinks that it's for the buyer to, I don't even know, like for the buyer to know what's wrong with the home. Yes, it is. But the real purpose of a property condition disclosure is to say to the buyer from the seller, these items aren't working correctly. If you want me to fix them, you got to make it in the offer. Consider it in part of the price. And there should be a light bulb moment for a bunch of you thinking like, oh, wow. So if the seller puts in there, house needs a new roof, and the buyer signs that property condition disclosure, sends it off with the offer, and then they get under contract. They're like, yeah, everything's good, except we're going to request that the seller buy us a new roof. Well, I'm sorry, no, we disclosed that's not something you can negotiate on. And all of a sudden you're sitting in a property, you're in your resolution period, and you're at a stalemate because you disclosed it, they made an offer, you accepted it, they knew about that roof, and now they want a new roof. No, you can't. We disclosed it. So you have to just be ready for it, and that's why this clause that I have, I'm going to go back to it here, that's why you have this clause. You're going to be putting it on the front page of whatever reports you are supplying to that buyer. Now, I said we're not going to be putting these in RealTrex unless it's a short version of it. What I don't want you to do is uploading an entire 78-page, 178-page inspection report. You can upload the summary page along with this, and I would write on that also, please request complete inspection report. Now, if your seller fixed any of the items, you would be noting that as well with your seller signing off on all of that, or themselves writing that. I would have them write that actually, what they fixed, and having it all PDF together as one, so the buyer can't claim they didn't see it. Best practice and agent guidance. I have put it in the shared documents in Transaction Desk. We have developed a Nashville Realty Group seller self-inspection list with your seller and strongly encourage them to complete, even if they're not getting a pre-inspection. So I made a list. It's just 2 pages. All of these things, and we've kind of taken the red flags that we see, not red flags, things that we see in regular inspections over and over and over again that the seller could have fixed at virtually no cost, that really could reduce the cost of what a buyer goes. This is their own self pre-inspection. Walk through the house and they're going to go through and check off, make sure everything looks good. This is also a really good opportunity for them to see items that they might have to disclose. I'm going to tell you that some disclosable items that over and over and over again that I wish, sellers would address are water stains under sinks and water stains on ceilings. Toilet overflowed once. That's not a problem in a house. It just toilet overflowed. It's dry. That stuff dries out. We're good to go. Just go on with your lives. But if we disclose that water spot happened when the sink got clogged upstairs and the grandkids overflowed the tub or whatever happened, disclose it. So this pre-inspection, seller pre-inspection checklist is a really good opportunity for your seller to go through the home and renew their memory. So when you get a chance to look at it, it's just about 2 pages long, and you'll see, like it says, change out the filters, look for this, look for that. Gaskets, open and close all the windows. How many times have we had sellers get a request for them to replace all the windows in a house when a simple self-inspection of all the windows opening and closing and maybe having the window guy come in and fix a few of these would have completely negated the need for us to even be negotiate on windows at all. So check out that list, because it has, even do it on your own home, because I was looking at it and I'm thinking, oh, I need to look at some of this. Like door gaskets, opening and closing all the doors and windows, making sure things don't creak. All these little things we see happen all the time in inspections that make buyers think the house is falling apart when actually it's just normal stuff that happens in our everyday living. So that for a recap, I strongly encourage you to think long and hard on before you recommend get a home inspection. You can always call me and talk to me about it. The list of the homes that I said could be a good opportunity. In the past, I have had them done on homes that sellers were insisting that we try and get a premium price. Okay, we're going to get a home inspection, and you're either going to fix or disclose all these items. I'd strongly suggest we get a home inspection to help reduce the likelihood of drawn out negotiation period or a buyer backing out, because we can fix these things ahead of time or at least disclose them. And the other thing is, I strongly encourage you to look at that pre-inspection home list, the seller self-inspection, and have all your sellers do it. The unbelievable amount of stuff that can be avoided by just this simple pre-inspection by the seller themselves, man, everybody should be doing it. Just like our final walk through that little punch list we get for cleaning, this is just like an extra level we can give them. And with that, I'm going to end this class. I will stay behind for those of you that are alive to answer any questions. So thank you. Bye-bye.